I'm going to predict the future. As we head into VCT season 2026, I'm going to try and make some educated guesses about where I think the game is going to go over the course of the season. This is something that coaches have to do at the beginning of every year during the offseason because when you're building a team and trying to come up with strategies for the competitive season, it's not as simple as just doing one thing. Riot has been very clear that they love change and they're constantly adding new agents, weapons, changing maps, nerfing, buffing things. And you have to be ready for all of these things to happen. And so, what I want to do is put myself in a coach's seat. If I was in the VCT, this is what I would potentially be prepping for in the future as we head into the season. And the first place that I just want to start is here is what the season looked like in 2025. You can see that there were 3 map changes. This was by far the most chaotic year that we had. And a lot of that had to do with how many changes were being made. We had 2 new agents introduced to the game, one right before the season started and one midway through. And we had 3 map changes as well, which is the most rotations that we've had. You can see real quick, this is 2023. There's only 1 map rotation between lock-in and champions. 2024 had 2 map rotations, and 2025 had 3 map rotations, with Split, Fracture, and Pearl starting the year, and Corrode, Ascent, and Sunset ending the year. This many changes means that there is so much going on, and metas are shifting, and agents are rising and falling in popularity. And it creates a lot of opportunities for teams to get edges if they can, adapt quickly to what's going on. One other thing that I think 2025 will probably be recognized for is the final death of Jet as an agent. This is really the first year where Jet fully fell out of the meta. In contrast, this year was the rise of Yoru. You can see that at the beginning of the season, Yoru was only 19% pick rate, and by the end of Champions, he was the second most picked agent at 53%. Utilize this new weapon. Honestly, I don't think the Bandit is going to have that big of an impact on this year. I think there will be, probably some teams that buy too many Bandits, and there will probably be some teams that do find an edge by using it in the right situations. But if we're really talking about a weapon that punishes light armor and has an outsized impact on how the game is played, I think we kind of need to look away from the Bandit and actually look towards the Outlaw, because this gun was introduced also fairly recently. And I even made a video about the Outlaw when it first came out, analyzing how Paper Rex was using it. Paper Rex are breaking the Valorant meta again, and this time it's not just some strange agent composition or aggressive playstyle. Paper Rex's use of the Outlaw is going to completely change how everyone plays the game, and you need to be ready. And I think we're probably still at a point in the game where it's still not being abused enough. This is probably one of the most important weapons in the game to know how to use, because it basically is just an operator if you buy it at the right time. And I think that probably this is the #1 target for a weapon that needs to be nerfed this season. And I think it probably will get nerfed this season simply because we're heading into a meta where we have less recon utility. The initiator class has kind of been nerfed to some extent. Agents like Chamber, Veto, Yoru, Waylay are all very, very popular and very good with the Outlaw as a weapon. And I think we're probably going to see some sort of change to this over the course of 2026, because right now, 2,400 credits is way too low of a price point for how much value this weapon gets. And it really does completely change how you have to think about your buys. Another thing I definitely want to address is just the map pool, because will Riot continue the same cadence? They've said that they like the idea of making the game change on a regular basis, to try and keep it in line with the live service of ranked and unranked play. But there were definitely a lot of complaints about how many changes there were. So if Riot does decide to have 3 map changes throughout the course of the season, then these teams need to be ready to adapt. And I think that's going to definitely favor the teams that have the more experienced coaches and players, because having to constantly swap around your map pool is a really big deal. It completely changes, how strong of a team you can be if you have certain maps that are targetable by opponents because you don't have the best grasp on how to play them strategically. I can't pretend to have the insight on how Riot thinks about map changes, but if I had to guess about a map that might rotate out, I think I would be targeting Bind, simply because one of the less popular maps, and it's been in the pool for quite a few rotations at this point. Corrode is too recent. Obviously, Abyss just came back. Breeze just came back. So I don't think any of those will rotate out. Um, and Haven is by far the most popular map and probably will be the most played map in the pool this season. Now, speaking of Breeze, I think one of my sort of maybe hot takes is that I believe Breeze will likely be one of the most popular maps over the course of this year. Usually, when Riot reworks a map, there's some pretty strong opinions about whether they did a good job or not. And overwhelmingly, it seems like a lot of people are excited about the new Breeze. Now, time will only tell how innovative teams will get on the new map, but it has been changed so significantly that it kind of is just a new map. And a lot of times, these newer maps give teams a lot of edge. And so a lot of teams put time into practicing them and coming up with a unique approach. Okay, now let's talk about agents. In 2025, we had two new agents added to the pool, and both of them had pretty significant impact on the meta. You can see this contrasts pretty heavily to how Riot operated in the previous seasons, where yes, there were new agents added to the game, but we're talking about, Clove, Deadlock, a lot of agents that on release were not that good, and none of them made it into the top 8 most picked at 2024 champions or kickoff, and same thing on 2023. No new agents were really that popular. Clearly, this has led Riot to change how they are designing agents, and they want them to have impact almost immediately. Obviously, that kind of makes sense. They want their new content to be popular. And they did a pretty heavy handed job of that with Tejo. Obviously, this agent was incredibly strong. It's actually surprising to see it only at 23% pick rate during kickoff, but obviously, a lot of teams learned, and he became one of the most ubiquitous agents in the game by the time Masters Bangkok rolled around, and that led to heavy nerfs. You can see that Tejo was 23% pick rate at kickoff. This rose even more in stage 1 and Bangkok, which led to heavy nerfs and made him fall almost completely out of the meta by the time champions rolled around. So very interesting arc for Tejo. Meanwhile, Waylay was added during Masters Bangkok in a state that was certainly playable, but definitely not as strong as she is now. So Riot offered her some buffs pretty quickly, which raised her profile, making her one of the more picked duelists by the end of Champions. So going into 2026, we now have this new agent, Veto. And Veto is a unique agent for a number of reasons. Obviously, he has a new utility, a new type of utility that is anti-utility. He has some unique characteristics of being able to throw his trip deep into enemy territory, and he has one of the more powerful mechanics in the game, which is a teleport. Basically, every agent that has a movement ability is played, and I definitely expect Veto to be a significant part of the meta by the end of the year. I definitely think he'll be played at kickoff, and I think that some teams will probably get him better than others, and those are the teams that'll have the most success with the agent and potentially at the tournament itself. Because I do think that Veto is a very, very strong agent, but I also know that he's not being used to his full potential, at least currently from the games that I've seen in the offseason. Now, if we actually go back to the agent list of the releases, you can see that there was a bit of a pattern for a while. We had Duelist, Smoke, Initiator, Sentinel, Duelist, Initiator, Smoke, Initiator, Sentinel, Duelist, Smoke, Sentinel, Initiator, and then we got Duelist into a Sentinel. We haven't had a Smoke for a while, and so I think I can pretty much 100% guarantee that this year we will get a new agent that is a Smokes agent. And if it is an agent that is introduced in the middle of the year, like we had Waylay introduced during Bangkok, I'm pretty confident that this new Smokes agent, regardless of what it is going to be pretty popular by the end of the year. Because I think we're kind of at a place now where the Smokes category needs a little bit of a shakeup, right? They tried to rework Harbor. People still don't think that he's good. It seems like when most people think about agents in the meta, you really kind of need to over push them for people to actually take the time to learn the new agent and pick it up. It has to be obviously very, very good. And I kind of think that that's probably what Riot will do if they do want the Smokes meta to change up. So yeah, I think that we'll probably get a new Smokes agent, and then the next one after that would maybe be an Initiator, but they've sort of deviated from, one of each of the main roles, and they're kind of more invested in doing hybrid agents now. So it's hard to trust some like very specific system of release. Now, let's actually really dive into the agent meta itself and look at some of the individual changes. I kind of want to go back quickly to 2023 just to take a look at this, where we had some pretty significant rises and fallers over the course of the season, with Sky being the most popular, or the biggest change between lock-in and champions. This was obviously back in the Harbor Viper days, and Sky was sort of like the jack of all trades initiator. We had KO falling off, Sova falling off as well in exchange for Sky, who does, and it kind of makes sense, right? KO was the flash, and Sova was the info. Sky was both of those, so she just took their place and allowed for more smokes to be played in response. Then in 2024, we had a significant increase in Sova and Fade coming back in, and this was sort of an era where we went from the double smokes of the Viper Astra, the Viper Harbor, into a bit more initiator focused gameplay. And you can see that Viper was um, sort of the biggest loser. Part of this was because of some nerfs. This is when they started introducing like the heavy nerfs to Viper. In terms of how long her smoke uptime was, not being able to pick up the orb anymore, and also there were some pretty significant map changes. You can see Breeze and Split left the pool, right? These are heavy, heavy Viper maps and were replaced by Abyss and Haven that were not. So the map pool plays a role, the nerfs play a role, and obviously some of the other agents play roles into determining what agents are actually popular by the end of the season. So looking at 2025 now, we can see that Omen was the biggest riser. And, I guess this is pretty obvious. 80% pick rate at champions, and he got some nerfs in response to that. Other big ones were Yoru. I mean, this guy was being picked under 20% at kickoff despite being incredibly overpowered. I'm talking about tier 1 players that know that Yoru is strong, and yet they don't fucking play the agent. What are you doing? Finally, Yoru had his moment to shine, right? Rising all the way up to 53% pick rate at champions. 34% increase over the course of the season. Other big rises were Waylay, right? We talked about her a little bit already. Coming into the meta, the double duelist being very popular. Viper, of course, rising up again as well. And then people are always going to continue to play the recon agents because they're just powerful. Wall hack is a very good ability. And I think it's kind of interesting to think about where we might go in 2026 now that the recon abilities have been heavily nerfed. So will they be replaced? Or will people continue to try and force their style of play? Then on the other side of things, we finally had people moving off Raze and Jet, really for the first time in the game's history competitively. And obviously, we have the rise of Yoru and Waylay to thank for that, and people finally realizing that there is just more value in some of these other agents and taking the time to learn them. And if I had to make some predictions about where 2026 is going to go as far as the agent meta is, I have to imagine that Riot is going to potentially nerf Yoru because he's finally becoming so popular. If we actually look at 2026 Challengers qualifiers, this is the most recent competitive event that has happened. And this is the top 32 teams in the open qualifier. So kind of getting rid of the teams that got, 13-0, 13-0 in the early rounds. These are the top 32, just below tier 2 teams trying to qualify for tier 2 in North America. And we can see what the meta looks like. 49% pick rate for Yoru as the most picked agent. Omen falling off a bit. Fade becoming much more popular than Sova. Viper, of course, maintaining her high pick rate. And then Chamber completely replacing Cypher, right? Cypher down at 4%. So this is definitely kind of where we're at right now. I would assume that a lot of these teams are scrimming tier 1 NA teams and probably stealing a little bit of their stuff. So we got popularity for Waylay, Neon, Yoru, lots of double duelists, probably some double smokes, and then maybe some chamber, little sprinkling of Veto in there. And this is probably the best guess of where the kickoff meta will at least start in North America, or in the Americas, and probably somewhat globally. But you never know. And so I want to talk a bit more about just the agent meta overall. I really do think that there's a pretty good chance that Riot is going to reevaluate the Sentinel class and potentially the Initiators as well, just because right now, with the amount of teleport agents that are popular, right? Chamber, Yoru, Waylay, Veto, even still the dregs of Jet being played, there's so much ability to just kind of completely avoid all of the Sentinel utility that it makes it really hard to play these, bunkered trap setups on site. And so I do wonder if we'll see a little bit more emphasis put on power for these Sentinels at some point this season. The other area that I'm looking at for some underrated agents is actually in the initiator class, as weird as that might be. Basically, since the game started in competitive, everybody has really respected the recon class of initiator. And there's been times where flash initiators have been used, but right now, all of that is sort of being superseded by Yoru because Yoru is probably the best flash initiator as well as also being one of the best duelists, and that's why you see so few people playing agents like Sky and KO. In addition, obviously, to those agents getting some nerfs. Now, I think that going into this year, if we do see a prevalence of double duelist, the main weakness of that comp or comps like that is that they don't actually have that much utility, right? The duelists are very good at hitting the site, but then for post plant and re-clearing and stuff like that, they generally don't have that much utility to do it. And so I think there are some areas where an agent like a Sky or a Tejo or even a KO could be super valuable. Especially the KO is interesting to me just because removing utility, removing the teleport of an agent that might be on a deep op line is pretty strong, and it might be one of the best counters in the game. So those are kind of the initiator agents that I would be looking at as being a bit underrated. And so while I don't know anything for certain, these are the best guesses that I have about where we might be going in 2026. I do know one thing for sure is that by the end of the year, the game is going to be completely different than it is at the beginning. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on stream.